Hello and welcome to the Strong Suit Podcast, where we focus on the people part of your business. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I interview a world-class expert on talent and recruiting so that you can build a company filled with rock stars. And I'm super excited for today's guest because he focuses, he's a worldwide expert on one of the most important steps in the recruiting process, and it happens to be the step that I'm guessing you don't even realize is a step. You're probably not doing it at all. And it's a very common mistake, and we're going to fix it today on this episode. My guest is George Bratt, and George is an expert at onboarding. Onboarding the new hires that you've worked your tail off to land at your company. And then if you're like most executives, I'm guessing you just throw them in the pool. And nothing could be further from the truth in terms of it being a logical plan to do that. It just doesn't make sense. So George has written books like The New Leader's 100-Day Action Plan, Onboarding, how to get your new employee up to speed in half the time. And let me just give you some quick numbers, and then we'll get right into it with George. He can help you understand how to take your typical failure rate, which let's define that as a new hire that doesn't work out. Typically, that's about 40%. I've actually seen it be higher than that. He can help you get it down to 5%. Now, you're never going to get it down to zero. You're always going to make some bad hires. That's just comes with the territory. But you can dramatically reduce the chance of a bad hire or that person not panning out. George is going to show us how. How are you, George?
I'm very well, thank you. Good to talk to you.
It's great to have you on the show because I'm obviously very passionate about this topic, as I know you are. And so why don't we start just at the 50,000-foot level? You've been doing this for a long, long time. What is the reason, the reason that so many executives just skip this step altogether? They've heard of it. They know it's important. Maybe their boss onboarded them in the past. Then they make this hire, and then they throw them in the pool. Why do they do this?
Because they think they can. Because they think if they've invested all this time, particularly in executives, they think they should know how to do it for themselves. And it's sink or swim. Throw them off the cliff and see what happens.
Part of it that they recruit someone and then they say, well, I recruited a great person. Otherwise, I wouldn't have recruited them. And that person shouldn't need any help onboarding because I'm such a great recruiter. Is it part personal reflection on their own abilities in recruiting that person? Or is it that they're so desperate and so late in the process, because they waited too long, they always do, that they need that person to start producing impact today?
Well, I mean, the short answer is yes, and it's both. And you've got to look at it from the new executive's perspective as well. Former dean of Stanford Business School said only 20% of people have enough confidence to be open to help. So people think that asking for onboarding help is a sign of weakness, when of course it's actually a sign of strength.
Especially with men, I find the male ego is wired in such a way that it's much tougher to ask. We all know the old joke, stop at gas stations to ask directions way before GPS. Women seem to be more open to this. Am I right in that?
I think that's fair. I don't know the statistics, but I believe that.
Got it. So you talk about 40% failure rate. What are the core drivers of the failure? Just before we get into what do we do about this, let's kind of dissect for a minute where bad hires go wrong.
Yeah, it's three things. The people that fail, and actually let me back up half a step, because the 40% is from one of your old companies. Heidrick and Struggles did a study of 20,000 of their internal searches and found that 8,000 of them were either fired, forced out, or quit within 18 months, and then they published it.
Terrible.
They went live on with the Financial Times. So that's where I get the number. I've heard 50%, I've heard 30%. I use the 40% because I've got the data to back it up. And then the three reasons that people fail are poor fit, poor delivery, or a poor ability to adjust to surprising changes down the road.
So let's pause and let's just peel the onion a little on those. Poor fit, what does that mean? Poor fit with culture or with the manager? Any idea what the specifics are in that one?
Yeah, it's fit with the culture. And it goes back to, honestly, this is your fault. This is the recruiter's fault.
Right. So it's a recruiting problem. It's not an onboarding problem. They never should have been there in the first place.
It's the thing that we as onboarding experts can't fix.
Okay. What was the second one?
Poor delivery.
Okay. So what does that mean?
So that means an inability to get done what they were supposed to get done. And the interesting thing about all three of these is whoever you ask blames the other side.
Of course.
So if it's poor fit, the company says, yeah, they just didn't fit. And the new hire says, they weren't who they pretended to be. If it's poor delivery, the company will say, or the manager will say, the new hire couldn't get done what they were supposed to get done. The new hire will say, they didn't give me the support and resources I needed to get done what they needed.
And the third one was?
A poor adjustment to changes down the road. Things change.
Right. And so this is where onboarding really can make an impact, right?
Huge. Because if you've built the network, if you've done the things we'll talk about to onboard people right, they are better able to adjust to changes. You have built a system where they can see the changes.
So onboarding can't resolve the issue of a bad hire where we just missed on DNA match, culture fit, et cetera. But beyond that, it can make a huge difference in reducing that failure rate. Let's set up a framework for listeners who are on the treadmill or in the car. So just kind of in your mind, what kind of mind map do you use, or categories or buckets when it comes to onboarding?
So I use a 5A framework.
Okay.
And it's and this is from the perspective of the new hire's boss.
Okay, great. So our listener has just hired a head of marketing, a head of sales, a product manager, doesn't matter. They've just hired someone on their team.
Exactly. It could be somebody just hired you as a product manager at Black & Decker, your first job, or it could be you being hired as a CEO.
Yep.
The 5 pieces are align, acquire, accommodate, assimilate, and accelerate.
Got it. So if I do all 5 of those things, I should theoretically have a successful onboarding experience with my new hire.
Yeah, and successfully, you're going to reduce their rate of failure from, call it 40% down to below 5%.
Got it. So in the context of this episode, we're not going to go into huge detail on all these. Give us the one. Let's start with the one that you think people have the most misconceptions around or screw up the most. Maybe we could just spend a few minutes on that first. I know it's like picking your favorite of 5 children, right?
Yeah, the one they screw up. Well, where they screw up, and I've heard you talk about this or reference this before, is people, when we started our company 15 years ago, I couldn't use the word onboarding. Nobody knew what I was talking about.
It was just an awareness issue.
It was an awareness issue. I mean, literally, when I went to Wiley with the book, I wanted to call it onboarding. They said, no, nobody's ever heard of it.
Yep.
And then they came back to me 3 years later and said, hey, we want you to write a second book, and we want you to call it onboarding. So we went from nobody being ever have heard about it to people thinking onboarding is orientation. They used to think it was stuff that you do. Some people think it's it was all the accommodation piece. Yep. It was all the forms to get people to sign up, and then it was all the stuff that happens on day one. So
right. Show them where the bathroom is. Here's the cafeteria. Meet your assistant. Fill out these forms. Watch the video of the CEO talking at you, and congratulations, you're onboarded. That was what was the word you used? Orientation.
Orientation. Absolutely.
Okay. And so tell us the delta, the difference now between that orientation and the onboarding.
So the difference is, you asked for the one thing, it's going to be the assimilate piece and then the accelerate piece. So if I only get to pick one that people aren't doing, it's the assimilation. If I get to pick 2, it's assimilation, accelerate. And so by assimilate, and so we've moved from orientation, and people say, oh, here's the answer. Let me give you a list of the 10 or 15 people you should meet, and I'll send you off to meet them, and hey, then you're assimilated. It's like, that's not really quite good enough. It actually starts with the announcement cascade. It starts with the way people hear about the new hire, and I'm happy to go into depth on that if you want. Then there's this checklist. One is absolutely identifying the stakeholders, introducing the new hire to the stakeholders, and that's an active verb. It's about the orientation, because that's part of it. It's putting them into big meetings. People hate meetings.
Yeah.
Unless they're new.
Yeah.
If they're new.
Then they suck it up like a sponge, and they're like, it's a great way for them to learn.
Exactly.
So when you get them in meetings, you're giving them the opportunity to fast forward the tape, if you will, and and learn a whole lot of stuff really fast.
Absolutely.
Got
And then the next piece is the behind the scenes networks. There are always behind the scenes networks.
So let's drill into that one for a few minutes, because I think my personal opinion is this is where things really come off the rails.
Yep.
So you make a new hire and you dump them in the pool, and that is missing how decisions are made, who makes the decisions, who really has the power and control, who you need to get to know, who you need to understand, all those kinds of very important questions. A skeptic, I guess, could call them politics. I would call them reality at most companies, whether it's 5 people or 5,000. Is that what you're talking about?
It's part of it. It's politics.
What's the rest?
What's the decisions, and part of it is just communication flows.
Got it.
My favorite one of these stories is somebody mapped the informal networks of one company, and everything routed through this one guy, and they couldn't figure out he was the mail clerk or something, and nobody could figure out why everything routed by him. And they dug into it, and it turned out this was the guy who organized the company's weekly hunting trips.
Oh my God.
So anybody that wanted to go hunting had to connect with him. And so he was interacting with people at all levels, and he knew everything.
Unbelievable.
Well, so if you came into that organization, you weren't a hunter,
yeah,
you'd never find that behind the scenes network unless somebody said, hey, here are the different behind the scenes networks. No, you don't have to be a hunter. But if you're a mom, if you have kids, if you like music, if you like, whatever, here are the different networks. We got to plug you into one.
So let's talk about how to do that. So I'm a VP of marketing. I hire a product manager. She starts today. What and how am I taking her through that network so that A, I don't scare her away and make her feel like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? And B, it's understandable and actionable for her. Am I showing her an org chart with spaghetti drawings all over the place, or like what does it look like?
Yeah. So if she's starting today and you're starting today, you are already so far behind the curve.
Okay. She starts in a month and I'm getting ready. How about that?
Thank you. So what you're going to do, and we can talk about the offer and a different way to do the offer. I mean, I like your concept of job invitations, but there's also an offer invitation. We can talk about that. You do that.
Did you say offer or author?
Offer as in, I'm offering you the job.
Got it.
And we can go back to that if you want. Let me answer this question. We'll go back to that one.
Got it.
So somebody's actually accepted the job. The very first thing you should do as the boss of anybody is sit down with them and co-create their personal onboarding plan.
Before they start?
The minute they accept the offer.
Got it.
A month in advance, 2 weeks in advance, depending upon the nature of what's going on. It could be 3 months in advance.
Yeah.
But if you sit down with them and help them create their onboarding plan, you can help them get a head start. You can help them manage their message. You can help them get ready to set direction and build their team in getting a head start. You can point them in the right direction so that, yes, some of it's the spaghetti chart with the networks, but that's overwhelming. It's more the few key people they should meet to help discover the networks on their own.
Got it. And how do I preface it so that they don't feel they've walked into a political nightmare? Am I just saying, look, the reality of an organ, you just kind of level with them, or how do you explain it?
Why is it bad?
It's not bad. I guess I'm just worried. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but I worry about everything. Maybe I'm worried that they're going to say, what did I get myself into? This guy, before I even started, is kind of preparing me for the politics of this place. I agree with you that we should put it on the table, but how do I put it on the table so I don't scare them or freak them out?
Well, you keep using the word politics. It's just, hey, let me help you assimilate into this organization, know the different people and the way they interact with each other and the culture. Every organization has a culture, and organizations' cultures are different. The example I love is, imagine you are driving from Ethiopia to Kenya, and you've hit the border at Moyal. You've gone in. You've checked your passport. You're literally across the border. You're back in your car. You've gone from Ethiopia to Kenya. You turn on the ignition. What is the next thing you must do? Must.
I don't know.
Well, okay. And there's no reason for you to know this, but you must switch sides of the road.
Oh,
Because in Ethiopia, they drive on the right. Kenya, they drive on the left. There's no way you should have known that. It's not politics. It's just reality.
got it.
And what's going to happen is when somebody joins a new organization, there are all sorts of examples of where they drive on the other side of the road. There's no reason for them to have known that. And as their boss, you got to help them.
You used a really interesting word, George. You said co-create this onboarding plan. I'm sure you're a sharp guy. I'm sure you did it you said by design. So why am I not just creating an onboarding plan and putting it in front of them and saying, let me take you through this? Why are they part of the co-creation of the plan?
So Brian Smith in The Fifth Discipline lays out 5 different ways to persuade somebody to do something. You can tell them, you can sell them, you can test it, you can consult, or you can co-create.
Yeah, got it. It's the best way to get the buy-in, right?
Well, yeah, if you tell them the best you're ever going to get is compliance, they will
Yeah.
do what you tell them to do and no more. If you sell them and persuade them, or test or consult where you have an idea that they build on, they get to contribute, which is wonderful. But if you co-create, they own it. They're committed. And if they don't own their onboarding, they're going to fail.
I just made a note. I haven't read that book in probably 10, 20 years. I better get back to it because you're right. That's how you ultimately get things done in the business world. So let's switch gears from co-creating the plan with them around the organizational dynamics. And let's talk about another huge bucket of stuff that they need to quickly get onboarded, which is all the information that they need to understand our products and services, our pricing strategy, our messaging, our sales commission plan, just the stuff that's kind of more black and white, if you will. Is there guidance you can give to our listeners on the most efficient way to do that? Is it done through videos, self-study? Am I just saying, go meet with this person and they'll teach you the product? What do you typically recommend to your clients?
Iterative, starting ahead. So this is where getting the head start is huge. Because if I've met with this person a month before they start and they've signed up, they've signed the NDAs and everything, even though they haven't joined, you can help them start learning. You can give them things. You can give them videos to watch.
So like pre-reading, homework, basically.
Yeah. So the best we ever did was we had a guy who was joining to be president of international for a company. It was 6 different division presidents. And he got on a plane 10 days before he started, and he flew around the world to meet with each of the division presidents just to get to know them as people.
Wow.
And then his first week, he was in the central office meeting with all the functions and learned about them. And then starting the second week, he went back around the world, and he went to each division, and he spent 3 days in each division meeting the division president's team and getting briefed on what they did. Then he came back to the headquarters and had all the division presidents come back in and all the functional heads. And they did a 2-day workshop. We facilitated this 2-day workshop where they co-created their plan for the next 18 months. So 3 weeks into the job, he had 3 separate interactions with each division president, with the functional leaders. He had learned, he'd done his pre-reading,
Yep.
He'd been briefed, he'd gone through the videos, he'd had it explained to him 3 times. 3 weeks in, he got more done than most people do in 6 months.
To me, that makes sense, all the sense in the world. How do you scale that to the next levels down in onboarding where you still have a lot of stuff for people to learn very quickly, right? Drinking from the fire hose, but you don't have the ability for them to travel to go see everyone, right? The whole company would spend time in meetings if we were hiring a lot of people. So what is a scalable method that can kind of cascade down to more mid-level hires, junior level hires, et cetera?
So we started out by trashing orientation because people put too much into it.
Yeah.
But we don't want to completely trash it because it's a great thing. If you do an orientation once a month, if you have your mid-level hires do the general pre-reading.
Yep.
But then you have your orientation once a month where you have all the key people come together to brief a handful of mid-level managers at the same time. It's a more efficient use of everybody's time.
Got it.
And after that orientation, well, before and after, then they can go out and dig into the things that are specific to them.
Which means that someone needs to take responsibility for thinking through the new hiring plan over the next months and quarters and grouping together and finding any economies of scale or efficiencies that they can, right? So if we're going to teach our products and services, features and benefits, pricing, we should do those in classes as opposed to one-on-one whenever possible.
Yeah, so our third book was actually called The Total Onboarding Program. So the first book was the new Leader-Centered Action Plan for the leaders going in. The second was onboarding for the bosses. And the third one was the Total Onboarding Program, which is for the organization. And it lays out exactly how to do that at an organizational level.
Got it. I'm assuming some of it can be done on video, some of it self-study, some of it in-person classes like you're describing with 5-on-1, 10-on-1. Others, like you said in the original example with the executive, are just one-on-one, right? It's got to be person to person.
Absolutely. And if I were rewriting it, I'd use the flipped classroom model. The old classroom model is you go to the class to learn and then you go do your homework. The flipped classroom model is you go to the video to learn.
Yeah.
And in the class, you're getting help.
Got it. Ask questions, et cetera.
Exactly.
Well, you've thought more about this topic than anyone I've ever met. So where do you start? So I would think this would be a little daunting to a listener who has no onboarding program, right? She's running a 50-person company, so she's barely keeping it together as it is. And she's hiring a couple of people a week. Where should she start? Not trying to get to perfection, but trying to make the biggest impact, as quickly as possible.
Personal onboarding plan. If I could
creation of that plan.
If we could do one thing.
Yeah.
Just if I can only do one thing, I would have every new boss sit down with every one of their hires as soon as possible after the people had accepted the job and co-create a personal onboarding plan. It doesn't even matter if it's right.
Just have one.
Yeah, and it goes to the offer piece. If we've got time for this, let's imagine that you want to hire me to work for you, which
I do. After this interview, I think I do. But go ahead.
Trust me, it'd be a really bad idea. So we've sort of done the negotiation. We've gone through the basic a lot of the 5 C's. We figured out the compensation stuff. And we sit down at lunch, and you make me the formal offer, and I say I accept. What do you do next?
Do I switch sides of the car driving?
Oh, maybe.
Okay. I would say before the words come out of your mouth that you accept, I begin co-creating your onboarding plan with you.
Oh, cute, but wrong.
Oh, okay. Well, I had a shot.
Yeah, I would argue that the words out of your mouth should be, wow, wonderful, fabulous. We did our due diligence on you before we got there because, we read the book and, we understand the importance of due diligence. But before I'm prepared to accept your acceptance.
Oh my gosh.
I want you to do a due diligence on us. Take the weekend, take the night, take a week, take whatever. We're going to go open book. We're going to let you see anything you want to see. I'm going to let you talk to the person that had the job that we fired. I'm going to let you talk to people that have moved through, whoever you want to talk to.
I have to stop you. It sounds perfect and it sounds insane. Are you being literal?
Literal.
You want me, after 3 months of busting my hump to hire someone, I get them to the table, I make the offer, we negotiate it, they accept it. And I say, I'm not ready to take your acceptance yet.
Well, play this out. I would argue there are only 2 possible scenarios.
Yeah, I'm very open to hearing them.
So scenario 1 is I go away and I do whatever, a day, a week of research, and I come back and I go, you know what? Thank you for letting me do that. The fit's wrong. I've learned I'm not going to be there. If I've learned that in 3 days.
Do I try to turn them around if that was the conclusion they came to?
Absolutely not. Because if I figured it out.
How about if they're wrong? If they say, I can't work with this guy, Bob, he's an introvert. And I say, that's true, he's an introvert, but he really warms up once you get to know him. Give him a chance.
Okay, so maybe there are some specific cases, but in general.
Okay.
If I figured it out in 3 days, I was going to figure it out in my first three weeks.
Yeah, then you've avoided a huge mistake.
And it's even better than that. Because if you get me to turn the job down in 3 days, because you have a stable of candidates.
You have a backup, an heir and a spare.
I have an heir and a spare, and the heir and the spare never know they were second choice.
Got it. So, but to be fair, I can't give them a week then. I can give them a day or 2.
Whatever it is. It's different at different levels.
Okay, let's talk about the other scenario, which I'm assuming you're going to say they did the due diligence. Now they're more bought in than ever.
And think about how we've started our relationship.
Trust, open.
Exactly.
That sounds very scary. You should be a therapist.
I believe in trust and openness.
I love the openness, but I think it's going to take our listeners a lot of confidence about the scabs of their organization. Every company has warts. Every industry, company, the manager. It's going to take a lot of confidence to your brand new person that you've worked for 90 days to recruit to say, take the weekend and think about it. I want you to be sure. In theory, I love it. I've never heard this before, and I love it. But it's scary.
So, and sometimes scary things are good. And there's some short-term pain for a lot. I mean, this is the old cookie test. You know, if you don't eat this cookie in the next 5 minutes, you can have 2 cookies.
Yeah. Which I'm the kid that failed that test.
Well, there you go. And that's why you're uncomfortable with this, and that's fine. So you do this. Then the person comes back and says, yeah, I'm all in. Now we sit down to co-create the personal onboarding plan, and we are partners. I'm not a salesperson. The very first thing I've done in our relationship is put myself on your side of the table to make sure this is best for you. The second thing is helping you co-create your personal onboarding plan. I am not your boss. I mean, I'm your boss, but I am your first best assistant.
Let me ask you a couple quick questions, and we're going to wrap up. So what % of companies get this stuff right and actually do this? I'm assuming it's
teeny. It's like
10%.
Yeah, it's really small.
So
that's why I have a business.
So it's a huge differentiator.
Yep.
Competitive differentiation and recruiting differentiation if our listeners decide to take this on.
Absolutely.
And it not only will that, but it'll also help them dramatically slash their failure rates. If you're a candidate, because some of our listeners are going to be candidates one day for a CEO role or what have you, would you go so far as to say if your boss and you don't start thinking about that, or if your prospective manager doesn't start talking about this, you should not take the job because he or she is not serious about your successful onboarding?
That's
too far.
Well,
now I've got too far.
It's too far because if only 10% of companies do it, they don't know.
Right.
So
I'm assuming you would agree that the candidate then has to step up and own it themselves.
The last real job I took, I told them I was going to do this before they offered me the job.
Do what? When you say this, do what?
I said, the minute you offer me the job, I'm going to do a real due diligence and I'm going to lay out an onboarding plan.
Got it. And they said, yes, of course.
Of course.
And you took the job and here you are as a consultant. And did you not enjoy working for them or did it work out? Did you onboard successfully?
I came in to run a division. I ran it for 2 years. We tripled the profits. We grew the revenue. We tripled the revenue, grew the profits 6-fold, spun the company off as a freestanding company with me as the CEO. When I was done with that, I was like, I don't have to do this anymore. And then I started my company.
And you are the one that developed the onboarding plan. Your manager did not.
We co-created it, except I led. It was more, he consulted with me because I led the effort.
Got it. I've learned a ton in these short minutes.
Great.
George, fantastic. How can people learn more about you and your practice? Which of the books should they start with first? Because you've written a ton on the topic.
So I'm crazy findable. If you Google George Bradt, I show up. You can find us at the PrimeGenesis website. I write for Forbes. If you read one book, it depends who you are.
Let's say you're just about to hire, a mid-level person onto your team.
So you want to read onboarding, and you want to give them the New Leaders 100 Action Plan.
Got it. So give them the book as a gift, almost a welcome gift.
Oh yeah,
I love it. George, thank you so much for making the time.
My pleasure.